Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell.
My name is Richard. I am 41 years old, and my life has been shaped by betrayals that came from the people who were supposed to stand beside me when the world crumbled. My parents were never the warm, supportive kind, but I never imagined they would take joy in my misery. When my wife left me, shattering not only my heart, but my sense of identity, my parents didn't offer comfort. They laughed. They mocked me like I was some failure of a son who had finally proven them right. At that moment, something inside me broke. I told myself that day I would never forgive them. And years later, when life had turned around for me, they came crawling back to my door, begging for help. But to understand how I got there, you need to know where it began that I married Claire when I was 30. She was vibrant, ambitious, and filled with the kind of energy that drew people to her. We met at a friend's party, and from the moment I laid eyes on her, I thought she was the one. Our first date stretched into hours of conversation, the kind of connection you don't stumble upon often. Within 2 years, we were married. It felt like a dream at first. Our small apartment filled with laughter, cheap furniture we put together ourselves, and plans for the future that my parents, however, never liked her. They said she was too good for me, that she would get bored of a man like me who worked a modest job as an office manager, and I didn't have grand ambitions. They made little jokes, sharp comments during family dinners, always with that smug undertone that I wasn't enough. Claire defended me at first, but the tension grew. My parents wanted me to be someone else, wealthier, flashier, more like my older brother who had moved abroad and made a name for himself. I was always the disappointment, and when I chose Claire over their constant disapproval, they quietly sharpened their knives. The cracks in my marriage began small. Claire grew restless. She wanted more excitement, more money, more recognition. I tried to keep up, working longer hours, taking on extra projects, but it was never enough. She started spending weekends away with friends, and I tried to ignore the gnawing suspicion. Then one night, when I was 34, she sat me down and said, "Richard, I can't do this anymore. I want out." No warning, no chance to fix it. Just the cold announcement that she was leaving me for someone she had been seeing behind my back. I remember walking out of that apartment in a daze, clutching only a small suitcase. My world had collapsed, and when I drove to my parents' house, desperate for a shred of comfort, I walked into something I will never forget. My father chuckled when he saw me. My mother smirked, and then, as I explained what happened, their laughter grew. My mother actually said, "Well, we knew she wouldn't last with you. Maybe now you'll grow up." My father added, "A woman like that doesn't stick with a man who brings home small paychecks. She wanted a real man, not you." Their words cut deeper than Claire's betrayal. I left their house that night, swearing I would never ask them for anything again. The following years were hell. Divorce drained me financially and emotionally. I lived in a cramped, rented room for nearly a year, scraping by on the little savings I had left. My nights were filled with loneliness, replaying everything I'd lost. But something in me refused to stay down. Every cruel word from my parents, every image of Claire walking away, became fuel. I worked like a man possessed, climbing through the ranks of my company, then finally making the leap to start my own business. It was brutal at first, long nights, constant setbacks, but slowly, brick by brick, I built something solid. By the time I was 39, my company had contracts worth over $200,000 annually. By 41, I had savings that crossed into the high six figures, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud. Not for them, not for Claire, but for me. And then, out of nowhere, came the knock on my door. When I opened it, there they were, my parents, older, frielier, but still unmistakably them. My mother's eyes were red with tears, my father's hands trembling as he clutched his hat. They looked at me like people drowning, desperate for someone to throw them a rope. My father's voice cracked as he said, "Richard, we need your help." I stood there frozen, memories flooding back. The laughter, the mockery, the betrayal when I was at my lowest. They had laughed at my pain, and now they were at my door, begging. That was the moment I realized life has a way of coming full circle. When I stood in that doorway staring at my parents, a part of me wanted to slam the door shut and never look back. But curiosity and maybe a shred of that old son's instinct made me step aside. They walked into my home slowly, almost timidly, which was strange to see. These were the same people who once mocked me, who treated me as though I was worthless. Yet now they looked like beggars in my living room that we sat down at the table, the silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. My mother finally broke it, her voice trembling. "Richard, your father and we're in trouble." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "What kind of trouble?" My father cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. "Financial. We made some bad choices. Investments, loans. And now the bank is coming after us. They're threatening to take the house." I stared at them, stunned, but also bitterly amused. The same house they had laughed in when my marriage collapsed. The same house where they told me I wasn't a real man. Now it was slipping through their fingers, and suddenly their son, the disappointment, was their last hope. "How much?" I asked coldly. My mother whispered the number, her voice cracking. "Over $150,000. I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to feel it, the weight of what they were asking. Then I said, "You know what's funny? When Claire left me, I came to you for comfort. I didn't ask for money. I just needed parents. And what did you do? You laughed. You mocked me. You told me I wasn't enough. Do you remember that?" My father shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "We didn't mean—" I cut him off sharply. "Don't lie. You meant every word. You enjoyed seeing me broken because it confirmed your twisted view of me." My mother began to cry openly, covering her face with her hands. My father finally looked at me, and for the first time, I saw shame in his eyes. "We were wrong, Richard. We should have supported you. But please, son, we're desperate. We'll lose everything." I leaned forward, my voice low but cutting. "Everything? You mean like I lost everything when Claire walked out? Like I lost my dignity, my home, my life savings in the divorce? You think losing a house compares to that? And back then, you didn't care. You laughed." My words hit them like blows. My father's lips pressed together, his jaw tightening as though he wanted to defend himself. But no words came. The irony was almost poetic. Years ago, I had walked into their house a broken man, and they had turned me away with ridicule. Now they sat in mine, broken themselves, asking for mercy. Life had spun the wheel full circle. I wanted revenge. I wanted to throw them out into the street and let them taste the same loneliness and despair they once wished on me. But another part of me, buried deep but still there, hesitated. They were my parents, the people who raised me, flawed as they were. Could I really watch them lose everything? Could I live with myself if I did? Why me? I asked finally. "You have friends. You have family. Why come to the son you treated like dirt?" My mother wiped her eyes and whispered, "Because you're the only one left who can help us. Everyone else turned their backs." I almost laughed at the bitter justice of it. They had burned bridges for years, alienating people with their arrogance. And now, when the storm hit, the only person left standing was the one they had once dismissed as nothing. I stood up, pacing the room, my heart pounding. Memories collided. Claire's cold words when she left, my parents' laughter echoing in that kitchen, the long nights I spent rebuilding my life alone. And now here they were, begging for salvation from the son they once scorned. I turned to them, my voice steady but hard. "If I help you, it won't be because I forgive you. It won't be because you deserve it. It will be because I want to prove something to you, to myself, maybe even to the world. But don't ever think for a second that I've forgotten what you did to me. That scar will never fade." They nodded quietly, beaten down, knowing they no longer had the power. For the first time in my life, the balance had shifted. I wasn't the weak son seeking their approval. I was the man they needed, the man they couldn't survive without. And in that moment, I realized the real question wasn't whether I would help them. It was how far I was willing to make them crawl before I did. That night after they left, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the glass of whiskey in my hand. The silence around me felt different, heavier somehow, because for the first time in my life, I had the upper hand over my parents. For decades, they held power over me, dismissing me, criticizing me, comparing me to others. Now, they were the ones desperate, their pride crushed, their home hanging by a thread. And I had to decide, would I save them or would I let them drown? Sleep didn't come easily. I tossed and turned, memories clawing at me. I remember that night when Claire told me she was leaving, how I sat on the edge of the bed with my heart in pieces, and how my parents had laughed when I turned to them for comfort. I remembered every cruel word, every smirk, every reminder that I wasn't good enough. I thought about the countless nights I spent rebuilding my life alone. No one to lean on, no one to tell me I was worth something. And now they wanted me to forget all of it because they were in trouble. The next morning, I decided to test them. I drove to their house, the same house where they mocked me, and walked inside unannounced. What I saw stunned me. My once proud father, the man who strutted through life with arrogance, was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of overdue notices in front of him, his head in his hands. My mother was pacing the floor, muttering prayers under her breath. The mighty had fallen. I sat down across from my father and dropped the first words like a hammer. If I help you, there will be conditions. He looked up, his face hollow, but his pride still flickered in his eyes. What kind of conditions? He asked. I leaned forward. First, you admit to me, right here and now, that you failed as parents when you mocked me during the worst moment of my life. You admit you were wrong. The silence was deafening. My mother froze mid-step, staring at me with wide eyes. My father clenched his jaw, his pride fighting with his desperation. After a long pause, his voice cracked as he said, "We were wrong, Richard. We should have been there for you." My mother started crying again, nodding through her tears. For the first time, I heard the words I had waited years to hear, but I wasn't finished. Second, I continued, if I give you money, it won't be a gift. It will be a loan, written down, signed legally, with interest. You treated me like a failure, but now you'll treat me like the man who saved you. You'll respect my terms. My father bristled, his pride lashing out. We're your parents, not your clients. I slammed my hand on the table, making him flinch. You stopped being just my parents the day you laughed at my pain. If you want my help, you accept my rules. The silence stretched again before my father finally nodded, beaten. Fine, he muttered. We'll do it your way. Over the next week, I met with my lawyer and had papers drawn up. A legal loan agreement, binding, with a payment plan that would force them to face their mistake every single month when they wrote that check. When I presented it to them, my father's hands trembled as he signed, his signature shaky and reluctant. My mother's tears smudged the ink as she added her name. Watching them sign away their pride was a satisfaction I can't fully describe. It wasn't just about the money. It was about balance, about finally reclaiming the power they had stolen from me all those years. But even as I left their house with the signed papers, a strange heaviness settled in my chest. I had what I wanted: revenge, control, their humbled apologies, but it didn't erase the past. Their laughter still echoed in my mind. Claire's betrayal still haunted me, and no amount of power over them could change that. I realized then that revenge might bring justice, but it would never bring peace. Still, as I drove home, I told myself one thing. If they wanted salvation, they would have to crawl for it. And I was going to make sure they never forgot who held the power now. The first month after my parents signed that loan agreement was almost surreal. For the first time in my life, I watched them approach me not as parents lording over their son, but as debtors facing their creditor. When they handed me the first check, my father couldn't even look me in the eye. His pride had always been his weapon, and now it was broken in his hands. My mother placed the envelope on the table quietly, whispering, "Thank you, Richard," like a beggar thanking a stranger for a meal. I took the envelope without saying a word, my silence a reminder that they were under my terms now. But as the weeks turned into months, the strain began to show. They had been used to living beyond their means, spending money freely, showing off to neighbors. Now, every dollar was counted. My father had to sell his beloved car, a classic he had polished every Sunday for over 20 years, just to make one of the payments. I saw him the day it was towed away. He stood on the porch, watching the car disappear down the street, his fists clenched at his sides. When he turned and saw me standing across the yard, his eyes burned with humiliation. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The whispers in town grew louder too. People knew they were in trouble, and they knew I was the one keeping them afloat. At church, neighbors who once envied them now shook their heads. At the grocery store, old friends avoided eye contact. My parents, once proud pillars of the community, had become objects of pity. And every time someone mentioned my name in connection with their downfall, I felt a grim satisfaction. They had mocked me when I was broken, and now their brokenness carried my signature. But revenge is not without its shadows. As I collected each payment, I felt both vindicated and hollow. At night, sitting alone in my house, I asked myself if I had truly won. Yes, they were humbled. Yes, they were paying me back, but the laughter from years ago still echoed in my mind. Claire's betrayal still haunted me too, a wound that had never fully healed. My parents' suffering didn't erase my suffering. It simply added another layer to the bitterness that had already shaped me. One evening, after nearly 6 months of payments, my mother came to see me alone. Her hands were shaking as she set down the check, and tears rolled down her face. "Richard," she said softly, "I know we hurt you. I know nothing we say can change that. But I'm begging you, please stop this. We are old. We can't carry this weight much longer." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, almost faltered. Almost. Then the memory of her smirk the night Claire left me surged back into my mind like a dagger. I leaned forward and said coldly, "You should have thought of that before you laughed at your son when he was at his lowest. This is what it feels like to be powerless." She wept silently, her shoulders shaking, and when she left, I felt both triumphant and disgusted with myself. I had become exactly what I swore I never would, someone who took pleasure in the pain of others. But unlike them, my cruelty had a reason. It was born from scars, not arrogance. That my father, on the other hand, grew bitter. Each time he handed me a payment, his jaw was tight, his eyes filled with resentment. One day he snapped, "You think this makes you a man? Bleeding your parents dry like this?" I looked at him calmly and replied, "No, Dad. What makes me a man is that I stood alone when everyone, including you, mocked me. What makes me a man is that I built myself back up when you wanted me to stay broken. This isn't about being a man. This is about you finally paying the price." He had no answer. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. By the end of that year, the payments had drained them. They sold jewelry, furniture, even heirlooms they once swore they'd never part with. Their once proud home grew emptier with every visit, the walls bare, the rooms echoing with silence. And with each loss, I saw a reflection of what I had endured years ago when they mocked me. Only now, they were living it. And yet, the closer they came to ruin, the more I began to wonder, when this ended, what would be left of us? Will we ever be family again? Or had that word died the night they laughed at my broken heart? The answer was coming, and I knew it would be brutal. By the time a full year had passed, the weight of my revenge had stripped my parents of almost everything they once held dear. Their home, once filled with expensive furniture and polished heirlooms, now looked bare, almost hollow. The rooms echoed when you walked through them. The proud garden my mother used to show off to neighbors had grown wild because they could no longer afford to hire help, and my father's once shining pride, his business, his car, his image, was gone. Every month they had written me a check, each one like another piece of their dignity torn away. When the final payment was made, my father placed the envelope on my table with shaking hands. He didn't say a word. His eyes were sunken, his face lined with stress, his back hunched like the weight of the world had finally broken him. My mother sat beside him, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. For a moment, no one moved. Then my father whispered, almost inaudible, "Are you satisfied now, Richard?" The question hung in the air, heavy, suffocating. I should have felt triumph. I should have felt the sweet taste of justice, of revenge finally complete. But instead, what I felt was emptiness. I looked at them, these two broken people who had once seemed so powerful in my life, and I realized that nothing, no amount of money, no humiliation, no revenge, could erase what they had done to me. Their laughter that night, when Claire left me, would always echo in my mind. Their betrayal could never be undone. I leaned back in my chair, staring at them with a mixture of anger and pity. Am I satisfied? I repeated slowly. No, because nothing will ever give me back what you stole from me. Not Claire, not my dignity, not those years I spent rebuilding alone. You took joy in my pain, and that scar will never fade. My mother sobbed harder, covering her face, while my father sat rigid, his jaw tight, his eyes glistening with something he would never admit: regret. After they left that evening, I sat in silence for hours. The envelope with the final payment lay unopened on the table. I didn't even care about the money anymore. What mattered was what the journey had revealed. Revenge can humble the guilty, but it cannot heal the wounded. I had brought them to their knees, yes, but the hole inside me remained as deep as ever. Weeks later, word spread through town that my parents were selling their house. They had no choice. Their reputation was ruined, their finances drained, their pride shattered. Neighbors whispered, some shaking their heads, others saying it was karma. And in a way, it was. They had mocked their son when he was broken, and life had come full circle to break them. One evening, as I walked past their house for what might have been the last time, I stopped at the gate. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn, the air heavy with silence. I thought about the boy I had once been, desperate for their approval, desperate for their love. That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and loneliness, and had come out stronger. But strength came at a price, and part of that price was losing any hope of ever having a real family again. Today, as I sit here telling this story, I know one truth. Revenge gave me justice, but not peace. What gave me peace was something else. The realization that I no longer needed their approval, their love, or their validation. I had built myself from ashes, and that was enough. When they knocked on my door begging for help, life gave me the chance to show them what it felt like to be powerless. And I did. But when the dust settled, I discovered the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not destroying those who hurt you. It's living without them, stronger and freer than they ever believed you could be.